and we're on page Kuftun Zion, and we're reading this here at the bottom. Ma hem hatzitzis v'lama nikra kain. So we're going to read the Rav. V'atanvar inyan the talis. Let's talk about the talis. Inyan the tzitzios. So there's two different things. He said one is the talis, one's the tzitzis. Daki meresha de erikadben nimshak chad kutza the sa'ari. So from the Resha de erikadben, you also have a bundle of hairs, one bundle of hairs. Nimshak bekutza the sa'ari de talia ad resha de za. It hangs down until it reaches the head of zeranpin. Kanizker be'idris nisa. Vinehu meir b'mochem de za. And that kutza de sa'ari shines into, bangs it really against the back of the head of za and shines into it. V'motziha rasam, and it brings out their light, l'chutz kaneda, outwards. And usually I thought this was the beginning. There's a lot of things come out of this kutza de sa'ari, including the beard of zeranpin. Being completed the 13 tikkunim. I know there are some more else. So it's a chutz V'gab zeranpin nimshach min reishei chad kutza sa'ari. So also from zeranpin, you also have the same thing, another bundle of hairs. B'tal yad reisha the nukva, and it hangs down until it reaches the head of the nukva. B'kutza the sa'ari v'da erikanpin hem sa'aros labonos. They're white hairs. B'shel zah hem sa'aros shcharos. They're black hairs. Kenizka be'idris nisa. 1 second, let me put my mind. I keep just forgetting something. My microphone on here. So let me see. Kenizka be'idris nisa. B'sham b'parsha shalach l'chocha bi'abiru. So it's been also explained over there. The is tzitz, the is tzitzis. There's two different things. Kitzitz hu d'chura. V'hu kutza the sa'ari de erikanpin. It refers to the bundle of hairs that come from the back, from the head. I'm not going to say the back here. The back of the head, really, from zeranpin. V'nikra tzitz d'chura. It's called tzitz, male. B'shum the ispashet ad resha de zah. He says, why is it called male? Because it comes from the head of zah. It comes from erikanpin to the head of zeranpin. The habi d'chura, who is male. But the bundles of hair that come from zeranpin, ikri tzitzis, it has a different name, and which is nashon nekeva. Mishum ispashet al resha de nuk, because it spreads and it extends down into the head of the nuk. V'nimska shinechem tzitz v'tzitzis. So therefore we see that both of them, yekroim kach, are called by this. Al shem sheyikacheni b'tzitzis roshi, and they took me from the tzitzis of my head, meaning something like, I thought the hair shehem bechinas sa'aros. Yeah, the saros. So let's see what he was trying to say by looking at the Tivuk Avanos on page Yud Ches. It's over here, and we're going to read the Tib. He says, Va'ata nevar harav inyan shnei ha'oros ha'mekifim halalu. Now we're talking about these two different mekifim. Shehem ha'or ha'makif shalatalis, which is the talis itself, which we had said previously goes to zeranpin, v'ha'or ha'makif shal tzitzis, and also the tzitzis provide a makif to the nukva. Meresha de erik anpin, nemshechas kavutza achas, is one bundle shall sa'aros of hairs, v'hi megia ad resha de za, it reaches to the head of zeranpin. He said, v'kavutza b'shechas de sa'aros de erikanpin, and this bundle of hairs that refers to erikanpin. Kevin shehi megia ad resha de za, so once since it reaches to the head of zeranpin, and he seems to think that the ultimate destination is part of the naming process. So therefore it shines into the head of Zah. Because we know the nature of the hairs, they are channels of Shefa, Shefa over Meir Darkum, and through them they shine. Magia that Resha de Zah, so it reaches the head of Zah, and it strikes the hairs, and it also strikes, he says both of them, and it strikes the mochim of zeranpin. So from the strength the smashing of this kibutza, this Ari, the Erikan, of the Arich, but Mochen Dezah, Yotzes Ha'aras HaMochen Dezah L'chutz, then there's a Ara that comes out, it bangs it out through the head, I guess. L'chutz Kanoidus. So we know this, and this has to do with the beard, and it has to do with the tefillin and different things. V'chein al zera b'derek yotzes v'nimshachas merosh hazah. So the same kind of thing happens with Zer Anpin. He has kibutza achas shal sa'aras, he has a bundle of hairs. V'kibutza chavzuch de sa'aras dezah, so that this particular bundle, nimshachas magaz ad rosh hanukva, reaches all the way to the head of the nook. V'kibutza shechal sa'aras de Erik Anpin, heim sa'aras levonos. So he says they're white. V'kibutza de sa'aras de Zer Anpin, heim sa'aras shcharos. B'shenina b'zoyer nizker. So now we talk this in the Zohar. Sheyesh shtei b'china shel sa'aros. There are two different aspects of hairs. B'china achas nikrus tzitz. V'b'china sheniya is called tzitzis. So we have tzitz and we have tzitzis. Ba'ofen shetzitz hu lashon zachar. V'hu meramas the b'chinas adechura. So it really is a reference to the masculinity over here. V'hu kutza des Ari de Erik Anpin. V'tzitz hu kubutza shal sa'aras the Erik Anpin. So he says that this is the definition of tzitz. Tzitz actually means a bundle of hairs. Those bundle of hairs that come from Erik Anpin, and they contain a yud kei vav kei in them. V'hatam shal sa'aros. So the reason why the hairs shall Erik Anpin nikroim tzitz shu lashon dechura hu mishum shahakavutza shal sa'aras the Erik Anpin nemshachas mispashetis ad reisha dezah. So that since it's actually going to a male part, it's like you have two male connections. Shahazal ku dechura mishum kach, and for this reason the kutza the Za'ari the Rich Anpin tzitz are nikras and nikroim tzitz shu lashon dechura. But what comes out of the head of Zer Anpin, nikroim tzitzis, they're called tzitzis. But tzitzis hu lashon nekeva, so the tzitzis is really a female word. V'tzarak bir mipnei machat tzitzis nikros davka b'shma b'shem hazeh, why they come from this name, shehu lashon nekeva. And I also say, why should this be? And he says the kaven shachagubutzu shel sa'aras dezah nemshechas and mispashas or mishpashetes magas ad reisha dedok, and since that's where it goes, the fichol came to crime tzitzis lashon nekeva, because they're going to a female place, and I guess that's like the track that takes you down and the female to the female place. Hagam shehem boim merosh hazah, even though we say that it comes from the head of zah shuhu b'b'chidah dechura, it doesn't matter. Kaven shehem megian the reisha denok, but since they come there, that's where they're connected and they're going to connect. So therefore, it's called the batzitzis. Levichoch hem nekroim b'shem tzitzis shuhu lashon nok. But the fi zera b'nimsa shehem tzitz v'hem tzitzis. So we have two different things. Shnei chem shnei mini sa'aros. They're both of them. They're two different types of hairs. Okay, now we have one more, and so he says, "V'nikroim b'shem zeh kevin shemitzinu shachakasav kora l'sa'aros b'shem tzitzis," because we see a pasuk that says that the hairs are called by the name tzitzis. But only when we come, that's only so he says, Rak Asher Mairi, it's only when we're talking, that's when you use the word tzitzis. Oz heim nikroim tzitzis. Oz hu nikra tzitz. Shagam hu melashon tzitzis. But Ada Nizbayer Hech Tzitzis He Melashon Sa'aros. So now we explained how tzitzis also is called by the name of hairs. B'hatim b'var harav Hech Tzitzis He Melashon Histaklos. And now we're going to explain so in other words, there's two ways in which it refers to hairs which hang down from the back of the head of Zer Anpin or Erik Anpin, first Erik Anpin and Zer Anpin. That's one thing. And now we're going to look at how it is called by the kind of concept of histaklus, of looking. So let's go back up to the top. And at the top we have Tam Acher Lama Nikras B'Lashon Tzitzis. There's another reason why it's called tzitzis. We'll read across the top. V'gam Inyan Tzitzis Shuhu Lashon Histaklus K'nizka La'el. Now we mentioned before that tzitzis is like tzitz min harachim. He says a tam kum b'fnei she'elachas aras b'kutza d'sa'ari de'erikanpen. It's because those hairs that are bundled up in the this bundle that's going of erikanpen, odza, hoyel nimshachem v'talin l'kabel an paichu de'erikanpen. So they hung down across the face of erikanpen. That's their originally. Odezeranpen. In other words, the hairs were in the face. And as a result of that, the hairs covered over the eyes. The lo yistaklu lo arich anpen b'za, below za benukva, and as a result of that, it keeps Eric anpen from actually seeing or looking at za, and the same thing from za to the nuk. The higher zeh b'zeh, in order to be able to shine into each other. So then he says, and through what we do, when we're talking about the mitzvah tzitzis, so what we do is what is it? Raminan, we send them back around the back of the head of Eric Anpin of the Zah, so therefore it becomes possible for Eric Anpin to look at Zav Nukve. So understand that these two different possibilities of looking, either the looking of Eric Anpin and the looking of Zeranpin, they're either called tzitz or tzitzis. Tzitz is taklusa the Eric Anpin Bazah. That's what that is. That's because we said it was male before. But tzitz is taklusa the Zav Nukve. So when this striking that we talked about before of the bundle of hairs that come off the back of the head of Eric Anpin or Zah, here he said this Ari b'mochan d'Zah, it caused, once again, he said before, this light to come out. It bursts out from the forehead. And there, at that point, it's called sitz, which is a male, lashon male. Ha'aras mochin the reisha the nuk, but when you come to the reisha the nuk, habaletis ayedecha because kutzah ari dezah nikras sitzes nekeva. So he says about this has all to do with looking. So let's come over and see the tiva kavanos, starting on number Lamed Zion. Number Lamed Zion says, "V'hatem b'vay harav heich yesh the tzitzis remez the histaklus," so that how it is that the word tzitzis has a reference to the concept of looking, examining. Kamosha kasa the el tzitzis shed tzitzis hu v'lashon akasav matzitz min harachim, like we saw before. V'hatam mifnei ma ana mez atvim b'tzitzis hu. So now we want to talk about why we wrap ourselves in tzitzis. Shetzitzis remezes a lashon histaklus, because we want to say that that's the concept of looking. This is looking at something. Now here's the kavana. I think the best kavana that we're seeing over about in this subject. He said lefi shachakavutza the sari shal erech of sharich amispashtim adazah. So that bundle of hairs that spreads down into zah. They also fall down on the side of his face. They go down his face too. So since they're on his face, so therefore what's happening is the hairs are covering the face. Shall Eric Anpin shalo yustakel bazah, so that he should be blocked. I guess that he's saying that what happens as a result of that is he's not able to look at Zer Anpin. which are also falling down on his face. So he's not able to look at the nook, and that means that the shefa from them is not going there. So the process of looking with the eyes, that's that concept. So since it's passing over the face, they're covering over his eyes. Eric Anpin Enu Yochel the Hoyer Lazaz, so he's not able to shine the Zachab Derek Istaklos. V'chein Machmeshach Hakutza this Aridizal Ovrim Derek Bonim, they're doing the same thing, they're going around by his face. V'chok lo Yochel Lazaz, so therefore Zav is not able Lihistako Bifnecha Benuk V'lohoyer Rabbelocha B'derek Istaklos, and to be able to shine on her in the way of Istaklos. So he said, so now we're coming, we're taking the talis and we're wrapping it around our upper third, our rosh and our upper third. As a gevutza des arashal Erik Anpin, Derek Achrav, what you're doing is you're pushing, this is a metaphor for pushing the gevutza des aros that are covering over the face of Erik Anpin, Derek Achrav, around to the back. And along with, I guess, you're also pulling the hairs of Zeranpin around to the back also. So why are you putting the bundle of hairs of Erik Anpin around the back? Who could they legalos as anayim shal Erik Anpin? Of course, it's in order to be able to reveal the eyes of Erik Anpin. V'yedei ken yistakel Erik Anpin bezah, and that causes Erik Anpin to shine into Zeranpin. V'yamshech belochim ha'aram histaklos anayim, so now you're shining into him this radiance that's coming from his. I guess it's the shefa that's coming out of the eyes of Erik Anpin and Zeranpin. The same thing. You're doing them both as you're sweeping the talis around the back. That's way I understand it. In order to be able to reveal the lights, and he's able to look at the nook. You bring her light coming from the view of the eyes. Is a b'shum kach, and for this reason, hatzitzis dekroim b'loshen tzitz v'tzitzis v'shnechem loshen histaklos, and both of them have to do with gazing or looking or supervising or something like that. V'ofen shen tzitz meramez al mal sha'an l'poelim b'mitzvah tzitzis. So he says with the tzitz is a really reference for what we do when we throw the tzitzis around our back. Shetehei histaklos erikan arich v'zun. Bazah, so that you should have the idea that what you're doing is you're making it possible for Erik Anpin to look at Zeranpin. But tzitzis meramas amasha an the poil in the word tzitzis, but mitzvah tzitzis as histaklon shal zah benuk. That's the other side. But okay, let's go to finish up now. V'adata bir harav as inyan sitz v'tzitzis, and now we explain tzitzis shehem loshen histaklos. V'atam evar harav inyan sitz v'tzitzis shehem loshen sa'aros. He wants to mention. So now we have another idea that it's also the concept of hairs. V'ayidei she'anach mamshichem b'mitzvah tzitzis, that we're pulling the tzitzis around as a gevutza this ari the Erik Anpin. The Arich Pa'achrav, and the whole idea is you're taking this bundle. I thought he was going to say that the talis itself, I don't know if he's going to say it or if he sort of said it, that the talis refers to what covers Zeranpin, or the staklos to allow the staklos of Zeranpin to Erik Anpin to Zeranpin, and the tzitzis themselves refer to the nook, or zah to the nook. But at any rate, he says, Yotzis ha'aras hamochim dezah, so then it causes a glow to come out of the mochim dezah l'chutz. And then he says, And then he said, "V'ha'aras hamochen dezecha beyotzes derek apedimi shalo ubeletes zu ha'ara b'mitzcho." And then it comes from the inside of Zal's head, and then it goes out onto his forehead. V'kasher beletes ha'ara b'zuch b'mitzcho shazah. Oz he nikras tzitz. Then he's called by the name tzitz lashon dechura b'fnei shahazah hu dechura. V'ha'aras hamochim haziyotzech min reisha denuk boletes b'makom mitzchas also goes out on her forehead. Shazuch ha'ara boleta b'mitzcha yotzes ha'yedecha because of gevutza des aras dezecha ba'orif denuk. It's because of that. V'nikra ha'ara chazu b'shem tzitzis, and therefore this is called tzitzis. And I think that is it for today. That is the idea. So when you wrap your talus around, you have the idea that you're actually removing the sorrows from the face of Eric Anpin and Zer Anpin at the same time, I guess, and throwing them around to the back to allow his stocklos. And it's also talking about the hairs. Oh, call two. Thank you very much. Why wouldn't you thank somebody, you know?